All right, Pops, every once in a while, we get real experts on the show. I am thrilled to bring Joshua Feygin. Joshua, thank you for being here. He is from, get this right, Dad, SUEDdealer.com.
Yes.
His name, not ours. His name, not ours.
Yes.
He is with us here today, Dad. We are thrilled. Joshua, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Josh, I guess we should let the people know that your practice is in Florida, correct?
Yes, sir. But I also practice in Vermont and Washington, D.C. as well.
Okay. Between the three areas, which area keeps you the busiest the most, or the most busy, however you would say that?
I'm sure it would be surprising to nobody if I said Florida, which is a sunny place for shady people.
Wow, I like the way you phrase that. So why is it, if I may, why is it in Florida the dealers feel like they can get away with anything?
I'm not certain that they feel like they can get away with anything, more so than they really can get away with anything. Unfortunately, our consumer protection laws are not exactly the strongest or the most in favor of a consumer. So that really lends itself to some unfavorable practices in the industry.
You may not know this, but Pops, the reason Josh and I got connected was actually through the work that Jeff Weinseer had done. Josh reached out to us after he saw we had done a video talking about Jeff's work. If you're new to the channel, if you haven't watched our video documenting the research that Jeff Weinseer did, it was all about lease buyout fees. And Josh, you shared with me in advance of us hopping onto film, you've defended, or you'll have to use the correct legal speak here, but you've worked with many clients who have been on the receiving end of illegal lease buyout fees. And that was kind of how we got connected, was through that work that you had done, correct?
Most certainly. And I'm actually litigating quite a few of those cases currently with my co-counsel, Darren Newhart. And we are pursuing dealerships all throughout the state, as well as lease servicers, for improperly disclosed or undisclosed fees that consumers are being charged at the end of a buyout.
All right, good news, Pops. We have another promotion.
Yep, Spring 20 and Spring 100. Get 20% off on our coaches and data, or get $100 off on an extended warranty. Spring ahead, everybody.
CarEdge.com. Take advantage. Thanks.
Why is it, or how is it that the dealers think they can get away with something like that when under the legal lease contract that these people signed, it stipulates what the buyout is, and that if there are no additional fees listed on that contract at the time they signed it, then there can't be additional fees added. So why is it they think they can get away with that?
Well, unfortunately, the fact of the matter remains that a lot of consumers simply don't know their rights. They walk into a dealership, they get blindsided by a car dealer that says, hey, your residual is X, Y, and Z, but you're not actually doing a buyout. What you're doing is a repurchase of the vehicle. You're going to sell it to us, we're going to sell it to you, and we're entitled to charge you fair market value for the vehicle. Other instances that I've come across is dealerships saying that they must recertify the vehicle in order to make sure it's roadworthy. Otherwise, that they're going to be tagged with some sort of liability for negligence or deceptive trade practices in the event the consumer gets into an accident using their own vehicle that they've been driving now for 2 years, 3 years, what have you. It's definitely a bizarre landscape, but it really boils down to dealerships seizing on the opportunity that the consumer just simply doesn't know their rights.
And Josh, you had mentioned to me in one of our prior conversations, or at least I think you had alluded to it, it's dealers, and it's also, like you mentioned, the leasing companies, and even like the OEMs. Like, the problems that you face are not only lease buyout fees, but there's myriad others that consumers need to be aware of. And just like you said, if you're not aware of them, the wool can get pulled over your eyes. Next thing you know, you're out a couple $1,000s. Could you share a couple examples of things that you work on that maybe folks in our audience should be Google searching or going back to your website to do more research on?
Certainly. So one of the the more prevalent claims that I've been receiving as of late are essentially undisclosed rental cars being sold by car dealerships. Inventory was slim. There were a few well-known rental car companies that were really freaking out during COVID, not knowing which way to go and what to do. And they started liquidating quite a bit of their fleet. Naturally, these vehicles appeared at Manheim and so on and so forth. They entered the stream of commerce. And under Florida law and in many other states as well, a car dealership is obligated to disclose the prior use history of the vehicle. They fail to do so. They don't tell the consumer that this 2020 Toyota Corolla with 30,000 miles all of a sudden was used as a rental car The maintenance history may be spotty. It may have even been crashed, and under normal circumstances should have been totaled. But because it's a self-insure operation, they don't have to abide by the reporting requirements. So a lot of times consumers usually come to me with some sort of issue like, hey, I just found out that the vehicle, sustained hard impact in the front, airbags went off, frame damage, so on and so forth. And lo and behold, the Carfax revealed that the vehicle was a rental car. More importantly, it also reveals that the consumer never had any sort of notice of the fact that the vehicle was a rental car. So that's something that I'm seeing a lot ever since COVID. It's obviously been something that's gone on for years before, but COVID really started to show an uptick in that particular claim. And again, the lease buyouts, that's really the main thing that I'm seeing day in, day out, just because of the lack of inventory. And, it's left dealerships scrambling to find different profit centers. And at the end of the day, consumers are also stuck between a rock and a hard place because they can't get another vehicle. They'd rather buy out the vehicle that they have equity in. Otherwise, that they're going to lose the upside of that transaction. And at the end of the day, they can go nowhere else to get something else. So really, the rental car, undisclosed rental cars, and the lease buyouts are really at the top of my list these days.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Wow. Can I ask you one other quick question? Is in the state of Florida, is there a cap on what dealers can charge as a dock fee?
No, there's absolutely no statutory cap. However, Florida Statute 501-976 subsection 18 requires that there is a statutory disclosure associated with the line item entry for the pre-delivery service fee. So as long as that fee is disclosed by basically a line item that says this fee is for cost and profit to the dealership for things such as inspecting the vehicle and preparing the vehicle for sale, then dealership, realistically speaking, can charge pretty high for that charge. Now, there are arguments whether or not it's reasonable, whether or not, the fee actually comports with some sort of work that was done to the vehicle. But at the end of the day, most judges aren't going to look into the terms of a contract and say, hey, that should have only been $600. Contracting parties are let alone to contract as they deem fit.
Unbelievable. What do you this just causes me to have so many questions. What do you think the state of Florida needs to do in a legislative way to create a more level playing field for, its citizenry? Because it seems to me everything is stacked against the consumer in Florida, and totally in favor of the businesses and dealerships down there. And I don't get that, because aren't we supposed to serve the people of the state?
Indeed. So obviously I don't want to, pretend that I'm anywhere near as wise as our legislature, but being on the ground level and seeing what I see, at the very least, a cap on the dock fee would be some sort of, $700, $800, $900, something reasonable. I've seen dock fees in excess of $1,500, $2,200 in lease buyout transactions, which is absolutely absurd, because at the end of the day, they're doing realistically nothing but 20 minutes of work to, draft up the paper, maybe originate financing, which they're essentially going to get some sort of remuneration for on the back end anyway, tacking on additional services and so on and so forth. So they're already making money to tack. And obviously, everybody's entitled to make a profit, but at what point in time does making a reasonable profit go over the line to taking advantage of consumers? Now, with respect to the lease buyouts, one of the biggest issues that I see is that essentially the state is inhibiting this practice. And what I mean by that is in Florida, if you sell more than 3 vehicles a year, you must be registered as a licensed car dealership. A lot of these lease servicers simply don't want the additional oversight of being a car dealership. So what they do is they tell the consumer, listen, we're not a dealership in the state of Florida. The state of Florida prevents us from selling the vehicle to you directly. You must go to one of our franchise locations and complete the buyout there. Well, realistically speaking, it's not that hard to make an exception for lease servicers or lenders to consummate the transaction directly to one of their borrowers and essentially carve out that particular area of law. And honestly, all of these claims that I'm, 200 plus claims that I'm dealing with would evaporate overnight. But I don't see that happening anytime soon, unfortunately.
It wouldn't be good for your business.
It's better for the general consuming public. Let me put it to you this way. I have no shortage of business, unfortunately. And, even if I would lose this particular line of business and this particular line of claim, but level the playing field, at least in one area for the consumer, so be it. That's the purpose of my job, is in order to really help the consumer as much as possible. Unfortunately, I got to make money off of it. I get that much, but
This forces me to think of the situation that happened in your state not too long ago in regards to Carvana and them not getting vehicles titled and registered in as timely a manner as is prescribed by the law. And there were actually state legislators proposing a new rule that, well, they just have to apply. There's no timeline as to when. And I mean, that just speaks volumes as to how they really don't care about their own constituents.
Exactly. Yeah, I was baffled when I saw that. I'm like, well, that's one way to solve the problem, definitely, but not in favor of the consumer, which it is at the end of the day your job to protect and assist. But I was baffling. I mean, and then Carvana is a whole different ball of wax. I mean, we can spend hours and hours and hours on that debacle.
Hey, so I just want to make one comment because I think I have some personal experience on the regulation side. We actually I carry an insurance producer license, Josh, and we have in all 50 states we're an insurance agency, so we sell property and casualty insurance. It's all good stuff. I worked with an outside compliance company to set that up. So, we're a little startup, a rinky-dink startup, and we spent the tens of thousands of dollars to do it. And you know what? We did it. These leasing servicers that don't want to spend $10,000 or whatever it is, it's not even that much to do it in one state to become a dealer. It is such BS, and it makes me think, especially as we've seen more and more OEMs, like Ford, for example, with their EVs, you can't even buy the lease out at the end. Like, there is no buy option at the end of a Ford lease, just like a Tesla lease. I think this is just some complacency and being complicit to, hey, this is how we control actions with the dealers, and the dealers make extra money and the lease servicers know. It's B-freaking-S, the idea that they couldn't get their dealer license. I figured it out, folks, for insurance producer in all 50 states. Not that freaking hard, okay?
And put it to you this way, after seeing some of the dealerships that are in business, apparently all that you are required to do or have in the state of Florida to become a car dealer is 1, a bond, 2, a brick and mortar location, and 3, a pulse. It seems as if just everybody that applies gets a dealership. It's not like up north where there's significant scrutiny as to who's applying and what all the details about the dealership. Here, I've seen some very interesting characters get car dealer license that, frankly, they shouldn't even have driver's licenses, but that's besides the point.
I've got a question for our audience to leave comments down below. What questions do you want us to ask Josh? And also a question to you, Josh, not to put you on the spot, but could we get you back in the future? And my third question to throw out there would be, how the heck did you choose to do this? Because I've got to imagine, you keep me honest here, it's probably much more lucrative to be on the other side of this. It's probably much more lucrative to be working with the dealerships, to be working with the captive lease company. Why would you choose to do what you're doing?
Certainly, and without a doubt, it's much more lucrative to be on the other side of this equation than it is to be in my position. At the end of the day, 90% of my clients don't pay me. I only get paid on the back end, and my success depends on our success in the litigation. But at the end of the day, way back when I first started, I had a colleague of mine refer me a car dealership that was being sued by another attorney with whom I'm actually really good friends with now. I looked at the case. I quickly realized that, they needed to settle the case. We ended up resolving the matter. But I thought to myself, after going through that experience, I'd rather be on the right side rather than, I don't want to say the wrong side, but not so right side. And it just left a bad taste in my mouth based upon that experience with my client. And I'm like, it doesn't sit well with me. And it's not to say that all car dealerships are bad or this or that or what have you. But, when you're looking at the equities of one of these claims, I'd rather be representing a plaintiff in order to try and get them some sort of redress. It's always this David versus Goliath type of argument. At the end of the day, most of the dealerships I go after are predominantly franchise dealerships, believe it or not. It's not these small independent mom and pops. And the reason why is because they have the finances to actually, go into a multi-month, if not a multi-year litigation in some instances, for no other reason than to essentially chill any future consumer plaintiff attorneys from pursuing that dealership in the future. So getting back to your question, frankly, I just want to level the playing field. There's not enough consumer protection attorneys in the United States. It seems as if for every one consumer protection attorney that represents a plaintiff, there's about 50 to 100 defense attorneys out there willing to go after, their fees. But at the end of the day, I just feel, moral satisfaction to be able to help a consumer out. Certainly, it does pay my bills. It's nowhere near as lucrative as, let's say, personal injury or what have you. But at the end of the day, it's an honest way to make a living.
Good for you.
Well, that's really awesome, Josh. We thank you so much for having reached out to us. We hope that you can be someone that comes back in the future. And I anticipate, Pops, as we get more and more FTC type actions throughout the year, it'd be great to be able to turn to Josh and get his take on those. And quite frankly, I'm going to throw it out there as a trio here. There's such an incredible CarEdge community. It feels like we could almost help with some of the policing that goes on and trying to identify the good dealers versus the bad. And it'd be great to maybe spitball with you a little bit about that, Josh, in the future and kind of get your take on how we could approach that.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And I absolutely love what you guys are doing. The more awareness that you guys bring to the consumers, the better. Like I said, when we first started out, at the end of the day, it all boils down to consumers simply not knowing their rights. The more information, the more knowledge that gets out there, the better for the general public.
I can't thank you enough, Josh.
It's a pleasure, gentlemen. Looking forward to the future.
Yep. Thank you.